Alright guys, today what we're going to be doing is finding some trig values, and we're going to do this a little bit differently. This time we're going to actually use the calculator to find some of these because we can't find them exactly. So the very first one we're going to find is just the cosine of 39 degrees. So what I need to do to start off with is I need to go to my calculator, and I need to make sure my mode is in degrees. So when I go to mode, I need to double check that, and right now mine's good. So once your mode is in degrees, to find the cosine of 39 degrees, I just simply have to type in cosine of 39, and that's going to give me the ratio of the adjacent over the hypotenuse side of a 39-degree angle. And we're going to round these to 3 decimal places, so this is going to be 0.777 for my very first one. Now where it gets a little bit tougher is whenever I have my reciprocal properties. So for example, if I have a cotangent or a secant or a cosecant, what we have to remember is that each one of these is the reciprocal of another function. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, and cotangent is the reciprocal of 1 over tangent. So the way I'll type this in my calculator is 1 over the tangent of 39. So all I simply have to do then at this point is just go to my calculator. I'm still in degree mode, and type in 1 divided by the tangent of 39, and I get my ratio. It is 1.235. Alright, our next one, there's just a small little difference. This time it tells me to find the secant of 4. But if you guys notice, that's not 4 degrees. That's actually 4 radians. So in order to change this one in my calculator, I need to make sure I change my mode. My mode needs to be set to radians. And other than that, I'm going to do the exact same thing. It's a reciprocal function, so I need to make sure I write that properly. So I'm going to write that in as 1 over cosine. I'm going to go to my calculator. I'm going to change my mode to radians, and I'm going to type in 1 divided by the cosine of 4, and that gives me my answer. It's a negative 1.530. Now if you guys look, it actually is possible to get negative numbers for these, because 4 radians, if you think about that, that's just past pi radians, which is 3.14. So that angle, 4 radians, is going to be in the 3rd quadrant. And we know in the 3rd quadrant, only tangent and cotangent are positive. So the other functions would all give negative values. So that's why that one's going to work out to be negative. Alright, so for our next part, we're going to move on and we're going to do this one. These are a little bit tougher. So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to find theta. I'm trying to find a degree value. So what I'm going to do this time is every time I need to find theta, or I need to find an angle, I need to use inverse on my calculator. And inverse, if you guys remember from geometry, inverse is just simply whenever I go to my calculator and I use second before I use my function. So if I want to find sine inverse of 0.308, I would type in second sine of 0.308 in my calculator, and that's going to give me theta. Now one other way you might see this written is as arc sine. And arc sine just simply means the same thing as inverse. And you would do both of these the same way. So we're going to go to our calculator, and we're going to type in second sine, and we're going to make sure our mode is in degrees. I don't think I changed mine. So I'm going to change my mode back to degrees, and then I'm going to type in inverse sine of my original question, which was 0.308. Whoops. And I get a value of about 18 degrees. So the sine of theta, theta itself is going to be 18 degrees. So if I were to go back and type in sine of 18 degrees, I would get approximately the same thing. It's a little bit rounded, so it'll be a little bit different, but it'll be approximately the same thing. And then the last part is the trickiest. This is when I have to use an inverse with a reciprocal. Now this is a little bit different because you have to remember I can't just change this to 1 over sine. And I cannot type this in my calculator as 1 divided by sine inverse of 1.507. If I type that in my calculator, I'm going to get an error. And we'll talk about the reason why that is in class. But that's actually impossible to happen. What you have to remember on this, anytime I take an inverse, the ratio is on the inside. And cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine ratio. So the reciprocal that I'm taking isn't of the function. The reciprocal that I take actually has to be inside. So the easiest way to remember this is when you have a reciprocal inverse, the 1 divided by goes inside. So for the inverse, the 1 divided by is inside. Okay, the 1 divided by is inside. So I'm going to type this in my calculator as sine inverse of 1 divided by 1.507. And as long as my mode is still in degrees, that's going to give me the right answer. So I'm going to go back to my calculator, and I'm going to do inverse sine of 1 divided by 1.507. And that gives me about 42 degrees, which is my answer. And that's all there is today, guys. It's a little bit shorter. I'm just getting familiar with using the calculator for some of these new trig values.